The glass cup exploded into hundreds of tiny shards. Black coffee splattered against the white wall like a wound. Leonard Caldwell slammed the document down on the conference table, his face flushed red, the veins in his neck twitching. 30 people, 27 college degrees, and not one of you can figure this damn thing out? His voice was low, every word hitting like a hammer on steel. The 40th floor meeting room went dead silent. Outside, a light rain tapped against the glass, as if trying to remind the world that the real storm was happening in here. On the long walnut table, a crumpled stack of papers sat like an open wound between the executives. Strange, twisted letters ran across the page, unreadable to all. "It's from our Eastern European partner," the assistant mumbled. "They forgot to include a translation." "Forgot, huh?" Leonard turned, voice curling into a smirk. "A multi-million-dollar company relying on Google Translate? That's rich." He pulled out his phone, swiped quickly, but the screen only showed a mess of tangled, meaningless characters. Slamming the phone down on the table, he snapped. "I don't want excuses. I want answers." No one dared look up. The room felt frozen, thick with the stench of power and fear. Then he let out a cold chuckle, the kind that made people wish they could disappear. "All right, if anyone here can translate this, I'll hand over my monthly salary, $120,000. Who wants to try?" A few nervous chuckles escaped, shaky and forced. No one thought he was serious. "No one?" Leonard asked again, voice sharp as a blade. "I thought this room was full of geniuses." And then, a voice spoke up, so soft at first people thought they imagined it. "I think I might understand it." The sound came from the back of the room, where no one had been paying attention, near the filing cabinet, faintly smelling of bleach. Every head turned. The speaker was a woman in her early 30s, hair neatly tied back, wearing a faded blue uniform. She was arranging a fresh bouquet in a crystal vase. Her name tag read, Ivy Moore, the woman who cleaned the 39th floor. For 2 full seconds, no one breathed. Then came a laugh from the CFO, part mockery, part pity. Leonard laughed too, a dry laugh laced with scorn. "You're saying, you understand it? The thing not one person in this room could read?" Ivy said nothing. She simply set the vase down, dried her hands with a gray cloth, and looked straight at him. Her eyes were calm, clear, and completely unafraid. Leonard stepped forward, his footsteps echoing sharply on the stone floor. "What language is it then?" "Not sure," Ivy replied quietly, "but I've seen some of these characters in documents from the Baltic region." The word Baltic made a few people furrow their brows, half skeptical, half intrigued. Leonard tilted his head slightly, like he'd just stumbled onto a new toy. "You want to give it a try?" "I only said I think I might be able to," she replied. "Then, be my guest." He flicked his hand, sending the stack of papers sliding across the table. The page stopped right in front of Ivy. She picked it up, eyes scanning line by line. The room was so quiet, they could hear the rain tapping against the windows. 2 minutes passed, then Ivy looked up. "This isn't a commercial contract," she said firmly. "Then what is it?" "It's a notice of inheritance from someone named Eleanor Whitmore. Seems she's related to you on your mother's side." The entire room froze. Leonard's brow tightened. "What did you say?" Ivy calmly continued reading. "The document clearly states that the legal heir, Leonard Caldwell, must confirm his claim to the estate by 5 p.m. today, or the assets, valued at $4.2 million, will be forfeited to the state." The air practically exploded. Leonard snatched the paper, eyes darting across the lines, then stopping at the final signature. Eleanor Whitmore. The name hit him like a punch. His heart skipped a beat. His mother had once told him stories about that distant aunt, the one who'd vanished from the family decades ago. The conference room went silent, like a church. No more laughter. Only Leonard stood frozen under the harsh white lights, his hand trembling slightly. He couldn't get a word out. Ivy gently set the papers on the table and gave a small nod. "Sorry if I overstepped, but I think you should call the representative's office right away. There's not much time left." Leonard stayed still, his expression caught somewhere between shock, confusion, and shame. And Ivy, the woman with worn-out shoes and rough hands, quietly turned away, picked up her mop and bucket, and walked off. No one in the room dared to breathe too loud. And for the first time in years, Leonard Caldwell, the man who believed he was smarter than the world, realized he'd just been saved from losing millions by the cleaning lady. The boardroom after the storm was completely still. People slowly drifted out, leaving only the sound of heavy rain pounding against the glass. Leonard was still standing there, gripping the crumpled paper with both hands. No one said a word, but he saw it in their eyes. For the first time, the CEO, once known as the man who could never be wrong, had just been saved from losing a generational fortune by the cleaning lady. 30 minutes later, Leonard was on a call with a notary office in Vilnius. Every detail Ivy had read was accurate, down to the last period. When the foreign staff confirmed, "Yes, Mr. Caldwell, this document is real," he said nothing. If it hadn't been for that woman, the inheritance and the family's honor would have vanished in a single day. He turned and saw Ivy still calmly wiping down the conference table, as if nothing had happened. No rush, no expectation of praise. Leonard spoke softly, "Wait here a minute." 5 minutes later, he returned, holding a hand-signed check, the ink still fresh. "This is $120,000. That's the amount I promised. You've earned it." Ivy took it, glanced at it briefly, then nodded. "That's the number you said. No more." Then she walked away, as quietly as she had come, leaving Leonard and the entire room in silence. No one said a thing, but their eyes said it all. Shock mixed with a trace of fear. No one dared to laugh now. That night, Leonard sat alone in his dark office. The city lights reflected on the glass like shards of broken mirror. He opened his computer and scrolled through the company's personnel files, until one cold line appeared on the screen. Ivy Moore, contract cleaning staff, education high school. Address, West Side suburbs. "No way," he whispered, barely believing what he was seeing. A woman with only a high school diploma had fluently read a language that his entire international linguistics team had been struggling to decipher for 3 days. Even with dictionaries? Leonard leaned back in his chair, sitting in silence for a long time. That feeling, a mix of frustration and curiosity, clung to him the rest of the night. The next morning, Leonard arrived earlier than usual. He didn't know why, only that he wanted to see her again. As he passed the custodial break room, he spotted Ivy sitting quietly in the corner, a cold cup of coffee in hand, an old, torn book in front of her. He squinted at the title, Baltic Language and Syntax, 1963 edition. No mistake. It was a book on an ancient language, one even his top experts had never mentioned. Leonard stepped closer. "You can read that?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. Ivy looked up. Her eyes were clear, a little tired, but steady. "Sometimes," she said slowly, "reading is how I remember who I used to be." The words froze Leonard in place. Nothing dramatic, no self-pity. Just a truth, sharp as a needle, piercing the armor of his pride. He wanted to ask more, but didn't know where to begin. For the first time, Leonard Caldwell, the man who could silence a boardroom with a single glance, had no words for the woman with the mop. The next morning, Leonard was called urgently back to the office. A Nordic partner had canceled a meeting due to language issues, and he knew there was only one person who could fix it. He found her near the women's restroom, changing the mop water. "Ivy," he said, not with command, but with need. "I need your help." She paused and looked at him. "Language again?" "A contract. One side sent a bilingual version with translation errors. If we don't fix it today, the whole deal falls apart." She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then said, "I'll help, but only if you and everyone else forget what happened yesterday. I don't want pity." Leonard answered instantly, without hesitation, "You'll be paid as a specialist, and no one's allowed to mention it." Ivy looked at him, and in his eyes she saw something different. Not arrogance, not command, but genuine respect. That day, Ivy sat between two of the company's language experts, going through a document thick as a brick. She caught a mistranslated phrase. Just one word, but it shifted the entire contract's legal intent. She marked it, corrected it, then translated the passage out loud into English, with near-perfect pronunciation. The conference room was dead silent. Leonard stood at the end of the table, eyes following her every move, precise, steady, confident, not a hint of hesitation. When the meeting ended, the partners applauded. Leonard said nothing. Only after everyone had left did he walk over, place his hand on the chair she had just occupied, and mutter, mostly to himself, "A cleaning lady who understands more than my entire 6-figure team." From that moment on, in Leonard's mind, Ivy was no longer the janitor on the 39th floor. She was the woman who shook his entire world, with knowledge, with composure, and with the kind of silence that carried real power. That afternoon, long after everyone had left the conference room, Leonard sat alone, staring out through the glass as the sunset cast its reflection. On the table beside him, the flawlessly corrected contract lay next to a cold cup of coffee. He couldn't stop thinking about Ivy. The cleaning woman, with hands that spoke a language even his best-paid experts couldn't decode. Since that day, she had appeared in his mind more than numbers, charts, or contracts ever did. He tried to find moments to talk to her, but Ivy always kept a quiet, graceful distance. Once, as they both waited for the elevator, Leonard said casually, "I'm guessing you studied language somewhere, right?" Ivy just gave a faint smile, her eyes meeting his in the mirrored elevator doors. "Used to. I worked in that world, but took a different path. Family." Then the elevator doors opened. She stepped in, leaving behind the light scent of soap hanging in the air. Leonard stayed where he was, feeling like he'd just spoken to a mirror. One that reflected things he hadn't dared face in himself. Curiosity drove him harder than pride ever could. One evening, he called his personal assistant, the one so intimidated by him she'd never once questioned a request, and said, "I want a full background report on an employee named Ivy Moore, as fast as possible." She hesitated, but when she met his sharp, unblinking stare, she gave a quiet nod. 2 days later, a thin file appeared discreetly on his desk, delivered like a secret. Leonard opened it. The very first line hit him like a brick. Ivy Moore, birth name, Iris Moravec. He flipped to the next page. She had once been a linguist working with UNESCO, teaching European languages and culture at universities across Finland and Poland. Old photos showed a different woman entirely. Long hair, bright eyes, standing in front of crowded lecture halls. Not the woman he passed in the hallway each morning with a mop and faded uniform. But just a few pages in, the file darkened. One line made his heart pound. Spouse, Victor Moravec. Died in a car accident in Bucharest, 2016. No criminal evidence found, but suspected linked to diplomatic file leaks that same year. He read the file over and over, his mind spinning. The woman who mopped floors on the 39th floor had once been a linguistic expert for an international organization, had translated state-level documents, had stood in places lit by spotlights and respect. And then, because of one twist of fate, she'd fallen to the bottom, silently doing a job no one ever cared to remember. Leonard felt a lump rising in his throat. That night, he left the office late. In the empty parking garage, light rain tapped gently on the hoods of polished sedans. As he approached his car, a soft sound caught his attention. Off in the distance, under a dim yellow lamp, Ivy was walking an old electric bike. A small child's backpack dangled from the torn seat. Beside her stood a boy. About 8 years old, sharp features but a faraway gaze like his mind lived somewhere else. Leonard stepped closer. "It's late. You're still here?" Ivy turned, a tired smile on her lips. "My night shift's not done. Had to pick up my son before the hospital closed." The boy looked at him, then quietly tucked himself behind his mother's legs. "Aiden," she said simply. "He has some emotional issues. The doctors call it mixed affective disorder. We have to keep up with his treatment." Leonard's eyes fell on the tiny helmet hanging from the handlebars and the worn raincoat draped hastily over the back seat. In that moment, the pride that had always lived in him seemed to dissolve. "Is your ride home far?" he asked, voice rougher than usual. Ivy nodded gently. "Not too far. About 40 minutes." She pulled Aiden's hood into place, with the kind of care reserved only for what someone loves most in the world. The boy looked up at Leonard, and something in those innocent eyes touched a place he hadn't felt in years. As mother and son rode off into the light rain, Leonard stood there, watching the old electric bike disappear into the mist, and felt a strange emptiness wash over him, a feeling he hadn't known in a very, very long time. The next morning, he opened Ivy's file again. This time, he noticed a small detail at the very end. Before leaving UNESCO, Iris Moravec had been responsible for translating classified documents during the 2016 diplomatic file leak. One red line crossed through the final note. Suspected surveillance target. Witness protection requested. Leonard tightened his grip on the file. A chilling piece of the puzzle had just snapped into place. He called in a favor from someone deep in the diplomatic world to verify the details. The truth froze his blood. Ivy's husband hadn't died in a regular car accident. He had been the key witness in the 2016 leak, and the car exploded 5 minutes before police arrived. The case had been quietly closed under technical failure. But everyone in the know understood. That was the official way to bury noise. Leonard sat in silence for a long time, and then it hit him. Ivy wasn't hiding because she was poor. She was hiding because someone might still be hunting her. She had changed her name, changed her profession, buried her past beneath the lowest, quietest work, all to protect her son. all to stay invisible. The next time he saw her, she looked exactly the same. Same faded uniform, same quiet presence. But to him, she was no longer the cleaning lady on the 39th floor. She was a survivor. A scholar who had once stood at the peak and then stepped willingly into the shadows to hold on to the one fragile piece of peace she had left. Leonard said nothing. He simply bowed his head as she walked past. For the first time in his life, a millionaire bowing to someone the world once labeled invisible. After the day he uncovered Ivy's past, something in him shifted. The rigid boardrooms, once dominated by sharp suits and sharper egos, now occasionally included a woman in a pale blue uniform, holding thick documents, her calm voice commanding a kind of silence even senior directors couldn't. Ivy never boasted, never played the part of someone special. She simply worked. Precisely, quietly, flawlessly. And the results spoke louder than anyone else in the room. But to some, that success felt like a threat. As Ivy was entrusted with more high-level contracts, whispers started to spread. In the break room, a group of managers muttered under their breath, half mocking, half bitter. Who does she think she is? Just a cleaning lady, walking into senior meetings like she belongs there. Another one scoffed. Maybe the boss feels sorry for her, or maybe he likes her. The laughter that followed was soft, petty, mingled with the sound of coffee dripping into a glass pot. Tiny, but sharp. The rumors spread faster than the quarterly reports. It didn't stop at whispers. One afternoon, while Ivy was reviewing a translation contract between Caldwell Industries and a Swiss partner, someone quietly altered a few lines in the original document. The phrase legal commission was changed to internal special fee. A small tweak, but one that shifted the entire meaning of the deal. Ivy had no idea. She received the document through internal channels, translated it carefully, just as she always did, and submitted it. 3 days later, the contract was signed. Then, during a routine audit review, an internal email leaked. The subject line was blunt: critical translation error, suspected contract staff. And at the bottom of the thread was Ivy Moore's signature. Within 2 hours, she was summoned to HR. Leonard had just come out of a meeting when he heard. His expression darkened instantly. He stormed up to the 15th floor, where the head of HR was holding a suspension notice. "Who signed this?" he asked, voice low and sharp like thunder before a storm. "The board proposed it." "I'm just following protocol," the woman replied, avoiding his gaze. Leonard turned to Ivy. She stood there. No excuses, no tears. "You know what this is about?" he asked. "I do," she said quietly. "But I didn't do anything wrong." "Then why is your signature on the file?" "Because someone wants me gone." The room fell silent. But in a company built on numbers and control, truth had no space for emotion. An emergency meeting was called that same night. The board, many of whom had once whispered behind Ivy's back, united in forcing Leonard's hand. He was told to sign the termination. "Protect the company's reputation," they said. He braced his hands against the table, voice rough with restraint. "You're firing the only person here with a conscience." James Porter, deputy CFO, let out a cold smirk. "This is a business, Leonard, not a church." The next day, Ivy entered the office for the last time. She packed her things neatly. A chipped ceramic mug, an old dictionary, a few worn notes scribbled in foreign languages. Leonard stood nearby, helpless. He wanted to say, "I'm sorry," but the words stuck in his throat. She turned to him, offering a smile so thin it looked like thread. "I know I don't belong in your world, and that's okay." Then she walked away. No drama, no glance back. The sound of her footsteps echoed steadily on the marble floor, like a ticking clock counting down the collapse of something far bigger than anyone realized. Leonard watched her go, feeling like he had just lost the most valuable thing he'd never taken the time to truly understand. A week passed. The office kept running. Emails went out. Deals moved forward. But no one mentioned the woman who'd been dismissed. Not until the independent audit report landed on Leonard's desk. Inside the contract that caused all the uproar, there wasn't just a translation error. There was a hidden chain of payments disguised under the label consulting fees. The person who authorized it? James Porter. When Leonard flipped to the final page, the line hit like a punch. Original document was altered internally before being submitted for translation. He slammed the file down on his desk. The sound thundered through the walls. The entire office outside went silent. That same afternoon, Leonard called an emergency meeting. Porter walked in, still smug, still composed. "Leonard, I think you're misunderstanding." Leonard threw the report onto the table. "Misunderstanding?" he snapped. You used her translation to cover up a bribe, then pinned it on her. You think I'm that stupid? Porter went pale. I was just following standard practice. Standard practice? Leonard cut him off. Is betrayal part of that too? He pulled out a pen and slashed his signature across the page. Immediate termination of James Porter. Entire finance department suspended pending investigation. The air in the room was suffocating. No one dared breathe. But even as the guilty man was exposed, there was no satisfaction. Leonard stepped out of the room, his eyes drawn to the gray late winter sky beyond the glass wall. He realized he felt no relief, because the only person he wanted to say, "I believe you" to, was gone. That evening, he sent people to look for Ivy. They arrived at her apartment on the outskirts of town. The door was locked, the inside empty. Neighbors said she'd moved out right after being dismissed, left no forwarding address. Leonard sat in his car for hours, staring at the dark, silent building. The guilt sat in his chest like stone. He had once looked down on her, then admired her, then pitied her. Now, all he felt was guilt. In a world ruled by power and bias, he had let the one person who was probably the most right walk away, quietly, permanently. A year passed since Ivy vanished from the halls of Caldwell Industries, and Leonard's world was no longer the same. Endless meetings felt draining. Handshakes rang hollow. The numbers that once gave him pride now only stirred exhaustion. He sold off shares, stepped down from the executive board, and started showing up in places he used to dismiss: community centers, shelters, underfunded schools. The man who once believed that money could buy respect had finally come to understand that what he lacked most was humanity. One spring morning, Leonard attended the opening ceremony of a language therapy center for children with autism, a project funded by his foundation. As he walked the halls of the community hospital, he paused in front of a small wooden plaque on the wall. The handwritten words made his heart stop: Volunteer Instructor, Ivy Moore. He read it again and again, afraid he was imagining it. Inside the classroom, a few children sat in a circle, giggling as a gentle voice guided them. "Let's say it together. Good morning." Leonard stood quietly in the doorway, watching her. Same tied-back hair. Slim frame, but those eyes still bright, still steady. Aiden sat beside her, now older, beaming with pride as he pronounced each word perfectly. Ivy looked up and met his gaze. A flicker of surprise, then calm. She gave a small nod, her voice low and composed. "Mr. Caldwell, long time." Leonard stepped inside, heart pounding. "I heard there was someone here, an incredible language teacher. Didn't expect it to be you," she replied, steady as ever, though her eyes kept a quiet distance. "Life's full of ironies, isn't it?" When the class ended, Ivy gathered the books while Leonard stood watching the children wrap their arms around her. The air here was different. No power plays, no ambition, just quiet sincerity. He spoke softly. "I didn't come to apologize. I came to say thank you. You taught me how to be a person again." Ivy turned to him, and something in her eyes softened. "People only change when they truly want to. If you've changed, that's because you chose to, not because of me." "Maybe," Leonard said, offering a faint, almost broken smile. "But you gave me the reason to start. I used to think I understood every language on earth. Turns out I didn't understand people at all." She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I'm not angry anymore, Leonard. That's behind me. All I want now is a peaceful life, to teach these kids how to speak, how to listen." He nodded, voice low. "Maybe that's the most noble thing I've ever seen." That afternoon, Leonard returned, carrying a small envelope. Inside wasn't money, but a formal offer. An invitation for Ivy to become Director of Global Communications at Caldwell Industries. He spoke carefully, as if afraid she might misunderstand. "I'm not doing this to make up for what happened, or out of pity. I'm doing this because of your true ability. You could help us rebuild the values I let this company forget." Ivy looked at the paper, then at him. "You think someone who was once fired would come back and work for that place?" "Not come back," Leonard said. "Come home, to a place that finally sees your worth. This time, you won't stand behind anyone." Aiden ran over, holding a small drawing in his hands. He handed it to his mother. On the page were two hands clasped together, and above them in crooked handwriting were the words, "Mom helps people talk to each other." The boy beamed. "Mom, if you help people understand each other, you're healing the world." Ivy froze. Her son's words pulled her back, to memories buried deep, to a time when she believed language could save lives, when she believed words could change fates. Her eyes welled up, her voice trembled. "My son really knows how to make grown-ups think." She folded the offer gently and said quietly, "I'll accept, but only on one condition. Everyone gets fair compensation. No favoritism, no special treatment. That not even for me." Leonard smiled, the kind of smile that comes from being humbled and grateful at the same time. For the first time in his life, he was being taught something by someone else and didn't feel the need to defend himself. "I promise, and maybe you should know something. I finally believe the greatest value this company holds isn't in its assets, it's in people like you." Ivy didn't answer. She simply nodded, then turned toward the window, where the golden light of sunset lit up her son's face. Maybe the world wasn't entirely cruel. Maybe it was just waiting for those brave enough to step out of the shadows and rewrite their own story. That day, Leonard left the hospital with a sense of peace he'd never known. Inside him, the fire of prejudice had burned out, making room for another kind of light, quiet, faint, but warm enough to start thawing all the things he'd once let grow cold. Another year passed, and Caldwell Industries had become a different world. The steel and glass tower that once felt cold now glowed late into the evenings, not from pressure, but from conversations where people truly listened to one another. As director of global communications, Ivy Moore became the quiet soul of the company, a woman respected by both staff and partners alike. She still dressed simply, white blouse, neatly tied hair, the same slightly worn flats, but her eyes, clear, steady, and strangely peaceful, shone brighter than ever. And Leonard, once known for his cold precision, had earned a new reputation, the man who knew when to bow to wisdom. He spoke less, commanded less, and asked more. In his office, the glass wall that once reflected metallic sharpness had been replaced by a photograph. A group of workers, janitors, maintenance crew, and Ivy smiling among children in a volunteer classroom. At the International Conference on Language and Human Dignity in Labor in Geneva, Caldwell Industries was the guest of honor. Ivy took the stage in a soft gray suit, not glamorous, but her presence silenced the entire hall from the first second. Her voice rang out, clear, composed, unwavering, seamlessly shifting from English to French to Polish to Latvian and finally to Spanish. She spoke of the unseen hands that keep the world turning, of the worth hidden in humble work, of the dignity woven into every drop of sweat. In the front row, Leonard sat still, no shifting, no glancing at his phone like before. He just watched her. Quiet eyes, steady, filled with something he had rarely allowed himself to feel: pride. When her speech ended, the room rose in a long, sustained ovation. Ivy bowed, and for a brief second, her eyes met his. Just a flicker, but enough. Enough to know that together, they had weathered the storm and made it here. That late afternoon, after the guests had left, Ivy stood alone on the balcony, watching the city shimmer under the glow of sunset. A staff member handed her a sealed envelope from the Lithuanian embassy. She opened it slowly, reading every word with care, and then she smiled. It was an official invitation from UNESCO, asking her to return to her former role in international language research, the position she once gave up. Leonard walked over and caught the expression on her face. "Good news?" he asked. She folded the letter gently and replied, "Maybe it's time I'm no longer the woman with the mop, but thank you for not looking down on me when I still held it in my hands." He met her gaze, voice low but firm. "You were never beneath anyone, Ivy. The world was just too slow to recognize your worth." She laughed, a real laugh, light as wind. "The world will understand eventually," she said, "if more people learn to see with their hearts instead of their titles." The next day, Ivy and her son left the city. The old bus rolled down a sunlit boulevard, skyscrapers slowly shrinking in the rearview mirror. Aiden rested his head on her shoulder, holding a small book written in 2 languages. Ivy looked out the window. The sky was so clear, as if it had never known rain. In her coat pocket, a folded, worn check lay tucked away, the first one Leonard had ever handed her. The ink had faded, but the signature was still there. She didn't keep it for the money. She kept it because it marked the beginning of something far more valuable. The moment she proved that dignity can lift a person above judgment, and knowledge can change the way the world sees. The bus passed through a square where workers swept streets, fixed wiring, unloaded crates. Ivy smiled and whispered to herself, "No one is lesser when they work with intellect and dignity." In the distance, the city bathed in sunlight after a long, hard rain. And among the crowd, there was once a woman the world refused to see, now shining in her own light. Not the glow of status, but the quiet brilliance of a soul that had finally been understood. Sometimes the greatest lesson doesn't come from success or failure, but from how we treat those who seem small in the eyes of the world. The world isn't short on intelligence. What it's missing is people who truly listen, people who can see the real worth hidden in hardworking hands and unshakable hearts. So what about you? When was the last time you truly valued someone for who they are, not where they stand? If you believe that every person carries a story worth hearing, hit subscribe and join me on this journey, a journey to uncover the stories that restore our faith in kindness, in dignity, and in each other. Thank you for being with us.